have these wild headaches, which they automatically said, oh, well, you played football for X number of years, or you did this, you had your accidents. That's where your headache comes from. And I tried to explain, like, no, this is different. And I was having wild bouts of nausea, a whole bunch of mental, confusion. My cognition was shot. And again, oh, these were all side effects from concussions. I said, no, something's going on. And there were three separate instances where, as a young man and as a bachelor, I tried to date, and I went on three different first dates. And the reason why there weren't second or third or an eventual relationship was all three of those dates, I wound up blacking out and collapsing and having to go to the hospital, which really, as a single guy, is not something that's too endearing. So I wound up finally, after months of telling people I was not feeling well. Like I said, we're now in September of 2016. It was a weekend, and I started off my weekend with going to the local medical facility. And that was a Friday evening. And they basically told me, we're going to commit you and put you on a psychological hold, as we think you have something mentally wrong with you. And I fought them tooth and nail on that. And I said, you guys are missing the boat. And I wound up leaving the hospital against doctor's orders. And I went to my parents' house. I didn't even bother driving back to my apartment. Drove to my parents' house, woke them up, and said, something is not right, and no one is listening to me. And my dad was a little skeptical himself, but he still said, I know when you're not feeling well. So he's like, just stay here the weekend. We'll figure out something on Monday. Well, Monday came, and I was probably awake for about 20 minutes. My folks said, look, we're going out to do some errands. And unfortunately, the errand they were running was cleaning out my aunt's house, who just had passed away from adenocarcinoma. So my dad just said, hey, and he jokingly said it, and I'm sure he regrets it to this day. He said, do me a favor. I know you're not feeling well, but only call me if you're dying. So 10 minutes after he left the house, I was on his living room floor, full on bout of Bell's palsy, couldn't use my legs, throwing up on myself. And luckily I had my cell phone in my pocket, and I just started mashing my cell phone, and it connected to my dad. And my dad, through his years of, training with the police department and the military, knew that something was seriously not wrong. So he drove like a bat out of hell back to his house and found me laying on the floor. And he helped pick me up, and he just knew that if he waited for an ambulance, I may not be sitting here speaking with you. So he brought me back to the same medical facility I went to on Friday night, where I was greeted with, oh, great, it's him again, as I proceed to throw up all over myself as they try to force insurance paperwork into my hands. They then bring me back and put me into the non-emergency area as my face is drooping, as I'm throwing up, and they're telling me, you probably have a head cold. And I had to use some crass language and tell them, you better give me a scan because something is wrong. And they finally listened, and they stuck me into a CAT scan machine. And about maybe 6 seconds in, all you heard was stroke team, room such and such. And I remember just being wheeled back to the room that I was in. And now my folks were there, and they had to see their only son having a stroke right in front of them. And they told him, they said, there's a golf ball sized tumor in his cerebellum that's causing a massive hemorrhage. He's had a very large stroke. We don't know if we're going to be able to stop the bleeding. So, I was there for about a week, whole bunch of transfusions. And then eventually I had a craniotomy, and they went in and they took that tumor out. And I was very fortunate that the doctor and surgeon who were performing the operation were actually from another hospital, a very reputable local hospital. And they had a handler from this medical facility who did not want either of them talking to my parents, because they wanted their people to be the one to tell my parents what was going on. And the surgeon who had been practicing for 35 years, came out and went to go speak with my parents. And the way my dad tells the story is he basically pie faced his handler and told him to shut the blank up and that my family had a right to know. And he said, I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm sorry to tell you this, but your son has cancer. Um, that's a melanoma tumor in his brain, and it's very sizable and it's very far advanced. Please get your son some good care after we get him cleaned up.